Hello, Resurrection. It's August the 28th. Have you ever been in any of the old Episcopal churches along the eastern seaboard, up through Georgia and Virginia and into the New England states? Have you ever been into any of the old churches up there? There are several things in those old churches that will strike you when you go in. And when I say old churches, I mean old Episcopal churches. In particular, there are first of all, they none of them are huge, but for the time, they were they were pretty big buildings because you needed a seat for just about everybody in town. You don't need a seat for everybody in town anymore. They're all built with incredible acoustics, and that is something that we've kind of lost the art of doing because PA systems kind of took the place of having to really build an acoustically perfect space so that a speaker could be heard by the congregation. So I'm always struck by the acoustics in these buildings. Great acoustics. I'm always struck by the size of the altar. The altar is always very small in these churches, and that is because these were primarily the Episcopal Church used to be a lot lower church in America than it is now, and so these were all basically morning prayer churches. You didn't need a lot of altar space because we didn't have the Eucharist that often. So the altar is usually way off, up in the front. It's a tiny little place with a tiny little communion rail. Not much room to get around up there because you just didn't use it that often because you had morning prayer. But then also on a lot of the old churches, as you're looking at that tiny little altar, there is some wall space on either side of it, and on the left and on the right, on both sides of that altar, there are very often huge plaques or carvings or something with what written on them. I'm wondering if you know. Usually on the left side, as you're looking at the altar, I do know my left from my right. I'm not sure which side my camera gets me on. So on the left side of the altar, as you're facing the altar, the Ten Commandments are always on one of those big plaques, and on the other side of the altar, the Lord's Prayer is always on the altar. The reason for that was that it was very likely that when, as a 12-year-old, you knelt down in front of the bishop for confirmation, he was going to ask you a question. And he was very likely to ask you to recite the Lord's Prayer or to recite the Ten Commandments. Or he might say, "What is the fifth commandment?" And they were cheat sheets. They were right there on the wall so that if you got nervous, as of course you would as a 12-year-old kneeling in front of the bishop who's asking you questions in front of the people who taught you the class and in front of your parents and all your friends, if you got nervous, those cheat sheets were on the wall. But times have changed, haven't they? From the day when the bishop would ask you certain questions to make sure before he confirmed you that you were prepared, that you could articulate the Christian faith in a succinct and intelligent manner. He wanted to make sure that not only did you believe what you were professing, but that you understood what you were professing. And we don't do that as much anymore. And I got to thinking about that, and Elizabeth Nash and I were talking about it and asking ourselves why we don't do that as much anymore. Now, I'm certainly not for grilling kids in front of the bishop when the bishop comes, but I am for all of us believing in Jesus Christ, but also knowing the Christian faith. Uh, the world is quick to tell you what Christians believe, and they're very often wrong. But if we don't know what we really believe, we can't combat that. We can't fight that. We can't fight back against the world on that. So we have to know what it is we believe. And getting kids to recite things and memorize things is old fashioned. and that is for sure. It is old-fashioned. Uh, but you know what? I very often call upon the things that I was made to learn and to recite and to memorize when I was a young man or a kid growing up in the Christian church. I still know my memory verses, right? I remember those from first and second grade Sunday school, and I don't think there's anything in the world wrong with teaching the old-fashioned things and following some of the old-fashioned methods. And it's something that I want to do with my Christian ed class, my Sunday school class this year, which starts not this Sunday but the next Sunday. All Christian ed Sunday morning Christian ed begins again, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday, September the 8th. And my class this year is on this part of this year is on a very old-fashioned sort of thing that we used to know like the back of our hand in the Episcopal Church. We used to be able to recite these things and know what they meant and know how to implement them in our own life. And I think we probably ought to start doing those things again. So the topic that I've chosen for this first unit is the 7 deadly sins and the 7 heavenly virtues. Now, we're not going to call them the deadly sins in my class. We're going to call them the cardinal sins, but I'm not going to tell you why yet. But I think the deadly sins is actually misleading about what those vices actually are. But we're going to learn about the classical vices and the virtues because more and more we are living in a day when morality is important. More and more we're living in a world that tells us that morality is a matter of opinion, that it may not be the truth or not, and that there may actually not even be a truth or not, or that truth might be different for some than it is for others. But Christians don't believe that. Even the Christians who say they don't believe it don't believe that. We don't believe that as Christians. We believe that in a concrete truth, in a concrete right and wrong, and that concrete right and wrong is rooted in Jesus Christ the Lord, who was, as a matter of fact, quite concerned about virtue, quite concerned about vice. He was concerned about morality. There are things that Christians ought to do, and there are things that Christians ought not to do, and Jesus was pretty clear about those. Jesus didn't have a lot of tolerance, a lot of patience for people who made vows and didn't keep them. He wasn't crazy about people who did not intend to keep those yet made them anyway. So what we're going to talk about on Sunday mornings is, and I'm going to be roughly using some of C.S. Lewis's writings to talk about the virtues and the vices. But C.S. Lewis was very clear in his understanding of morality that God gave all of us a sense of right and wrong within ourselves, that we were born with that, and that was put there by Almighty God. C.S. Lewis actually believed that was a proof for the existence of God, that had been woven into us by something or someone before we were born. And he also didn't have a lot of time for people who understood morality in the terms of, look, as long as I'm not hurting anybody, I ought to be okay. I shouldn't have to worry about the things that we've always worried about in the past, as long as I'm not hurting anybody. And C.S. Lewis said that that's not what Christians believe. And I think I can show you that you don't believe that either. I think we'll all agree that that is not what we believe as Christians. And we're going to talk about those 7 virtues, those cardinal virtues, and those 7 sins, the cardinal vices. We're going to talk about those in terms of our Christian morality, the things that we ought do and the things that we ought not do. And I'm actually kind of energized about that. I'm looking forward to it. So I hope that you all will join me. There's not a text for this class, but I will be copying some readings and things like that for you as we go all along the way. So I hope that you'll join me. At the same time, we're having that adult Sunday school. We're having senior high Sunday school. with Dustin and Susanna Bledsoe High School, 9th through 12th grade Sunday school. Karen Nicolosi is singing with the kids and with the middle schoolers on Sunday mornings. And then in just a few weeks, we'll begin Wednesday nights again, back to youth group on Wednesday nights and children's programming on Wednesday nights and adult Bible study, continuing with those 100 essential biblical passages that everybody ought to be familiar with. You ought to have in your arsenal. And we'll begin all of that in just a few weeks on Wednesdays, right after our family supper, right after family dinner together. I'm looking forward to it. I think we've got some good things planned. And again, and I know that every time I brag on you, attendance lags. I don't think that there's any reason to that. I think it's just a coincidence. But sure enough, I bragged on attendance last week, and then our attendance fell off again this Sunday. But I do want to say that even with a slightly lower attendance last Sunday, that y'all have been just killing it lately with church attendance and with education, with Christian ed and things like that. And I'm so grateful to you and proud of you. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Y'all keep doing what you're doing because you're doing a good job with it. And then join us for Sunday school for all ages, not this Sunday, but next Sunday. I'll see you then.